So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Burton Suite Lunchtime Charity Catch-Up. We do a series of these on a regular basis, and we're very glad that you've been able to join us today, whether you've been to one of these events before or whether this is your first experience. We're really pleased to have you with us. My name is Cecile Gillard, and I am the Charities Legal Manager at Burton Suite. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Ed Marsh, who's Head of Charity Development at Burton Suite. We hope very much that you'll find today helpful for learning, for sharing, and in particular for prompting you perhaps into action with charities that you are part of or charities that you have other links and relationships to. I know we have some professional advisors in various fields, like, for example, investment, insurance and other specialist fields with us today. So please use it as a call to action on various things as well. We want to equip you to ask some of the right questions. We want to alert you to areas you should be aware of and perhaps thinking about discussing in your charities and considering action in. We want to equip you to be more confident about your charities and how you're running them, to make your charities fit for purpose, more effective and safer as well in areas where there might otherwise be risks to them. We've got about an hour together, and Ed and I will give you some thoughts on some of the subject matter that we're covering today. And we'll also have opportunity for questions and answers. The way in which you can submit questions, you can either enter them into the chat box. I expect most of you know the chat function is usually at the bottom of your screen. So type them in as we go along, and we'll pause and take questions in towards the end really of the session. Alternatively, if you feel like speaking, please indicate that, and we'll unmute you and by all means ask the question out loud if you would like to do that. Talking about speaking, as you would have been informed as you joined, this session is being recorded, so we can send out a recording to you later on. We will make sure that names aren't included. There won't be any images of our faces, but if you do ask a question out loud, obviously your voice would be heard. And just to be aware of that, that you're aware of that. It might be something you don't want to necessarily identify the specific situation or charity. If you could make questions of sort of general interest to people, that would be great. So the content today has been suggested really by our experience working with you and the suggestions you've made about areas that you would like to have more information about that you're finding a bit challenging at the moment. Or that you otherwise need some more understanding of. After the session, we'll send you an email which will ask for some more feedback, and that will help us work out what we'll include in the next of these catch-ups. So thank you for doing that. There'll also be a post-session email with a copy of the slides and any other information that's worth sharing with you after the session. So that, I think, deals with the practicalities. And what are we looking at today by way of topics? Well, this is our agenda for today. We'll be looking at some topics around gift aid and the gift aid small donation scheme. We'll be thinking about charity constitutions, and we'll fill you in with some news and updates around law, regulation, accounting, reporting. And then we'll spend some time on questions. Do please submit questions, because they can be particularly helpful, not only to you, but to others on the session. So that's where we're going today and the areas we're going to be covering. And I'll hand over now to Ed, who will give us some thoughts around gift aid and the gift aid small donation scheme. Ed, thank you.
Thanks so much, Cecile. This is in response to some requests to sort of go through gift aid. And I guess really what we want to do is give some reminders about gift aid essentials, but also to share with you actually how can we make the most of gift aid. Now, actually, this session contains some good news. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what could be better news than England making their way through to the Euros final. But I say it does get better than that, because believe it or not, one of the things we'll be mentioning about gift aid is not a tightening of restrictions, but actually a bit of a loosening of some of the flexibilities around a couple of areas around gift aid, which may be of interest to you. Yeah, it's a good week, isn't it? It's a good week. So gift aid. I just want to start with a question, and we're going to put a little poll out and get you to answer this question. And it is this. So it should have flashed up on your screen. Chance to choose an answer. Now, if a donor decides that they would like to give £100 to a charity and gift aid applies, how much could this potentially be worth to the charity? So if you could submit your answer, and you see I've been really kind and I've given a I don't know little option at the bottom there. For those where, you know, this is kind of launching in far too quick for you, and you know, you've not even had your lunch yet, you need to get your brain working. The I don't know option is just a kindness for you there. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes, sorry, another 20 seconds or so, just to see if we've got other responses, and then we'll see. All good. Some people really braving it. Fantastic. And 3, 2, 1. Okay. So these were the results, and very understandable results there. So most people going, 77% going for £125. There's a few people venturing northwards of that. There's a few people saying, I don't know. But thanks. Actually, what we will find, and what I will show you a little bit later on, is that there are a kind of unique set of circumstances that could potentially mean, depending on the situation of the donor, depending on the particular circumstances, where a gift that costs a donor £100 could be worth £181 to the charity, which might just slightly blow your mind. But we'll just have a little look at that as we go through. Gift aid has been with us for quite some time now, and this is just a bit of background as to gift aid and its contribution to the charity sector. So the UK public give around £9 billion to charity each year. I haven't yet seen the stats for 2020, which could be a bit of a different year, but around about £9 billion. And we also know that the proportion of the UK working population who are taxpayers is falling. In fact, the latest stats here for 2016, obviously things have moved on, probably dropped a little bit more since then. But then we also know that just over half of donations by value were given under the gift aid scheme. So the important thing to recognise is that gift aid is a very important part of the charity sector's income. It's really pleasing that study, that full-on study, which there hasn't really been a repeat back in 2016, showed that the general donor awareness of gift aid is actually averages around 88%, which actually I think is fairly good news. That's a good thing. A lot of people know about gift aid, very aware of its existence. But actually there's still a gap. There's still a gap between the kind of potential for charities to claim gift aid on donations and that there's actually claimed. And so actually the gap is estimated as being £560 million to the sector. That actually if only everyone got their ducks in a row and got things sorted out and advertised the opportunity to give by gift aid and encourage people to give by gift aid, that actually potentially it could be worth that much more to the sector. What is that? Is it about misunderstanding about what gift aid is and how it works? Is it too complex? Is it that charities are just not giving enough opportunity to donors to be able to claim gift aid? I don't know. I think there's a feeling that gift aid is quite complex and it is in need of reform. And there's certainly a whole agenda at the moment to sort of see how can gift aid be simplified. Is that a central donor database to do away with the need for gift aid declarations for every single charity? Is there something about the way the gift aid declaration is worded that actually puts people off for filling in a gift aid declaration? I just want to go back to some basics and just to say here are some essentials to get right when it comes to gift aid. And there are 6 things we're just going to whiz through quickly here, and there's a couple of changes as we go through, but these are the things you need to get right to claim gift aid, to make sure that you have a clear understanding on. Firstly, that a charity claiming gift aid needs to be recognised by HMRC as a charity for tax purposes. That's not an automatic thing. Actually, to be eligible to be recognised as a charity for tax purposes by HMRC, you need to be registered with the relevant charity regulator, whether that's the Charity Commission in England and Wales, whether that's OSCA in Scotland, other regulators, if you are required to do so. Now, some charities, for all kinds of historic charity law reasons, are accepted or exempt from the requirement to register with the regulator. The number of those charities is reducing, but still very high. You can still, because you're not required to register with the regulator, you can still apply for charity tax status. But it's important to recognise you do need that charity tax status to be able to claim gift aid, and it's an application process. I did this for a charity I'm a trustee of back in 2008, and I wrote them a letter and I said, oh, we're a charity, here's our Charity Commission entry, please give us charity tax status. And they wrote back and said, yes, here you go, here's your number. Now it's kind of a 38-page kind of form, as you can imagine, lots and lots of hoops to jump through to be able to be recognised as a charity for tax purposes. What's another essential ingredient? Actually, there must be a donation to claim gift aid on. And actually, that word donation is important. It must be a gift. It is not a payment in return for something. It's not a payment of school fees. It's not the right to go into an event. It's not, believe it or not, anything that's labelled a donation that really isn't. Actually, if you say, we'd love you to come along to this event, we're looking for a minimum donation of £20, that's not a donation. You might have a suggested donation, but actually if that minimum donation is what gives you that entry, then that is not a donation. It's not raffle tickets, and it's not a payment for advertising. So it must be a donation, it must be a gift. It must be a money payment. So it must be the donor's own money. They can't just kind of pass on money from someone else. If it's their money that they're giving, it's potentially eligible for gift aid in their name. That money payment might be by bank transfer. It might be by card, a credit card, debit card. It might be by PayPal. It might be by cash and check. Those used to be at the front of my list when I did this presentation. But actually, I don't know the last time I saw a check. I mean, it's things are changing a lot, aren't they? And I haven't had money in my wallet for a very, very long time. But gift aid is eligible for those as money payments. It might be gifts that are received via a text message platform. Actually, anything like that does qualify as a money payment. But to be clear that it is not, you can't claim gift aid on a gift in kind. You know, if I were an expert website builder and I gave a day of my time to a charity to build a website for them, I can't just say to the charity, oh, I've given you a day of my time, you can claim gift aid on my time. That's not possible. It does have to be a money payment. It can't be in lieu of claiming expenses. If you're a trustee and you decide not to claim expenses for attending a trustees meeting, perhaps travel or subsistence expenses, and just because you've decided not to claim them doesn't mean that can be, a gift aid claim can be made on them. That might cause some people confusion because they think, oh, I've seen that happen before. Well, actually, of course, what might be able to happen is that a proper expense claim could be submitted for trustee expenses, and it might then be of their own free will and free volition. The trustee might decide to make a separate gift-aidable donation to the charity for gift aid to be claimed on it. But those two things are not related. They're completely different. And this is where there's some change, which may or may not be exciting to you. I used to include on this list, it doesn't, gift aid can't apply. A money payment is not a loan waiver. It's not a decision that I gave a loan to the charity 2 years ago, and I now don't want to be reimbursed for it. And therefore claim gift on it. You couldn't do that before. During the pandemic, there was a temporary measure that came in that allowed charities to where there were fees paid for events and where those events were cancelled, that potentially get everything in place, they could claim gift aid on people who decided they didn't want a refund from that event. The good news is that particular provision has now been extended permanently, so that's no longer a temporary measure. It's a long-term measure. But actually, it's been extended to loan repayment. So, if, for example, you've got a donor who, a couple of years ago, they decided to give an interest-free loan to the charity because they didn't yet know whether they could support that building project by way of a gift, but they gave an interest-free loan instead. Actually, rather than have to repay that loan and have a separate donation made, which carries some risk to it about whether they would actually do that, you can now actually, under certain conditions and certain controls in place, certain paperwork in place, that loan repayment could be waived and claimed as a gift aid donation at the time it was waived. When we do our post-event mailing, I will send you out a link which gives the detailed rules to that. But that's a change, and that's actually a welcome change for many charities. Believe it or not, a money payment is not goods given to a charity shop. That's interesting, isn't it? When I give goods into a local charity shop, they talk about gift aid. Why do they talk about gift aid? Well, of course, and this is very, very detailed, and you might want to dig into it a little bit more. But actually, you are not. Gift aid is not being claimed on the item that you donate to a charity shop. Instead, what's happening is that you are saying to that charity shop, "I would like you to act as my agent in selling this good on my behalf." And actually, when you sell that good, either pass on the proceeds to me, or actually I'm going to donate those proceeds to your charity. So the goods themselves are not the gift aid transaction. It is the proceeds that you still have a free decision whether or not to donate those or not. The complex rules, I'm not going to go into that now, clearly, but there's lots to look at. There must be a declaration in place. Gift aid essential, that's so important. And these are the essential ingredients for a gift aid donation, a gift aid declaration. And this effectively is the donor saying to the charity, yes, please claim gift aid on these donations. And here are some declarations, some understanding that I'm really clear on as I make this declaration. Interesting points here. You don't have to have signatures on a gift aid declaration. You also don't need to have the date that someone makes a gift aid declaration. You do need a date, so long as insofar as it identifies the period covered by the declaration. You know, what donations does this cover? You don't actually need a signature or a date. Most people I know, including charities that I am involved in, we do have a signature date. We like people to sign up for things. We like for people to commit to something, and there's something helpful about that, but that's not required. And there does need to be a confirmation of real kind of understanding, a real declaration, which might take wording a little bit like this. I'm a UK taxpayer and understand that if I pay income tax or capital gains in the current tax year less than the amount of gift aid claimed on all my donations, it's my responsibility to pay the difference. In other words, what the donor is saying is, if I make this declaration falsely, if I haven't paid enough tax, it's my responsibility to make good with HMRC, which I think probably might put some donors off from donating at the prospect that they might make a mistake and then have a tax bill. There's all kinds of practical ways in which charities might deal with this, but that's just important to highlight. That wording is important to be on the declaration. It is a gift. It's absolutely a gift. Gift aid only applies to gifts, but there might be some occasions where there's some kind of incidental benefits that a donor might receive in consequence of making a donation. And there are particular rules around that for those and those connected closely to them. And that's what these are. I've got these here for completeness. We'll send you the slides after the event. There's a few very small things that are ignored, like simple acknowledgements when there are fundraising events in honour of a donor. This is one that you'll be thinking to yourself about your local whether it's Bristol Zoo, whether it's We the Curious or something like that. You'll wonder why is there gift aid on the right of admission to charity property? There's a specific provision around that, which means those benefits are ignored. I'm not going to go into that now either, but that's a particular area. But don't think because those organisations do it that you are entitled to do it for your concert or your event. There's particular rules around that. And then finally, get the audit trail right. Make sure you are keeping the paperwork, even if it's scans of the paperwork, even if it's a record of conversations, a record of verbal declarations. Make sure you keep a record, because the penalties for getting it wrong are severe. The HMRC's approach, which I'm not sure how much they've been doing reviews recently, but their approach has been that if they find an error, they might let you off that one error. But actually, if they find a few errors, they might extrapolate that error across your entire population of gift aid claims. And that could potentially be quite costly to your charity if you don't get it right. And they could extrapolate not only in this year, but also up to 4 years back. And that could be quite a big penalty. So getting it right is important. But it's not just about complying with the rules, it's about making the most of it. And I just want to encourage you to make the most of gift aid, to give people the opportunity to give via gift aid. Make sure you have the option for people to fill in a gift aid declaration where relevant. The paperwork can feel a little bit onerous sometimes, but actually let's give people as much opportunity as possible. Let's tell the story of the difference that gift aid makes to our charity. I bet for many of us in our charity context, if we add up what that gift aid we claim achieves, let's tell people that. Let's tell them that by ticking the box, they are making a big difference. Do chase up declarations, do make retrospective claims. You know, if you've been getting a regular donation for a few years from a donor and you don't have a declaration in place, I'll ask them politely, oh, I just wondered if you're a taxpayer, whether you'd be willing to fill out a declaration. You know, actually a £100 a month donation going back 4 years is several £1,000s as a claim. So it's worth doing. And finally, educate on tax relief. Higher rate taxpayers and additional rate taxpayers can claim extra tax relief back on their tax returns when they make a gift aid donation. But the reality is this, that only 22% of higher or additional rate taxpayers actually claim that extra relief. And actually a whole 48% don't even know that it's a possible thing. And actually that if we can just have sensible educational conversations with our donors, sometimes we can see our charities in a kind of a much better position. And this is where we come back to our question, my rather bold assertion at the start that potentially a donation would be worth £181 to a charity. And here it is. Let's say a basic rate taxpayer, one paying tax at 20%. They make a donation of £100 to a charity. The charity can claim 20/80ths back, which is £25, and it's worth £125 to them. Of course, the donor, it's cost the donor £100. Now, for an additional rate taxpayer, now these are kind of people earning more than £150,000 in taxable income. So, you know, you might not have a lot of these, maybe not a lot of these, but actually they're paying tax at 45%. If they make a donation of £100 to your charity, you can claim £25, 20/80ths, £125 that's worth to you, but it's only cost them £69 because they can claim back on their tax return extra tax relief for the between the 20% and the 45%. So imagine you have a well-educated additional rate taxpayer donor that you've got a good relationship with. If they really understood the position, they could give you a gift of £145. You'd claim gift aid on that, and that it would be worth £181 to you, and yet it would only cost them £100. And that same principle applies to higher rate taxpayers, of which there are a few more than additional rate taxpayers. That maths might blow your mind a little bit. You might want to take a little while to work it through and look it up and that kind of stuff. But I just want to say there's an opportunity here, educating our donors, helping them understand that this extra tax relief exists, and that could potentially benefit the charity if they decided that they wanted to make a donation that cost them £100 or whatever amount. Then actually a bit of kind of careful planning means that's worth a lot of money to the charity. Anyone's mind is slightly blown by that. That's it's quite exciting, isn't it? Finally, before I hand over to Cecile, gift aid on small donations scheme. This has been around for quite a while now, and it allows charities the opportunity to claim back a gift aid style repayment on small donations of cash or more recently contactless donations. And those are donations that are £30 or less. Now, there is no requirement for the donor to be a taxpayer because this is not tax relief. Despite the fact that you claim it along with your gift aid, it's not actually tax relief. So there is no need, therefore, for a paper trail from the donor. There's no need for a declaration. It's been quite a welcome scheme. It's actually, for many charities, it's perhaps just a very small part of their income, but actually for a lot of charities not to be sniffed at. There's an overall annual limit of £8,000 of donations this is eligible to. So that's potentially worth up to £2,000 for a charity. Or if a charity operates in more than one community building in a local authority area, they can have an £8,000 allowance for each building. And that is a very welcome thing. There is no news yet as to whether, nowadays I can go down to Tesco or other supermarkets are available, obviously, and I can flash my contactless card around and pay a lot more than £30 than they used to. There's no news yet of whether that £30 limit will be increased, but we hope it will be increased, that it could cover all contactless donations. But I think the thing to say about this in closing is this, that actually it is actually quite a complex scheme. The rules are quite detailed. Eligibility requirements are quite high. That there is a need to have a good gift aid claiming history. There is a need to make sure you are claiming gift aid donations. You can't just claim gift aid on small donations in isolation. And the record keeping is really important. And also, even in the rules, this is interesting, this one, even in the rules, they say you need to make sure if someone gives you a wad of notes, you know, if they give you a wad of notes that's more than £30, that's not a small cash donation. So you need to demonstrate somehow that you're the counters of money, that they receive the money, that they are able to have a process to identify what is actually a small donation and what is a rolled up load of banknotes or perhaps something like that. So that's important. I think if I could make, I don't want to be too political in the comment that I make, but I just want to show you this little graphic, which I have a lot of sympathy with. Is the gift aid and small donation scheme is wrapped up in a tremendous amount of very complex rules. You know, I just wonder whether the same level of diligence is being applied to the tax liabilities of large corporates. End of political comment. And I'm going to hand over to Cecile.
Thank you, Ed. Love the cartoon. So we're going to talk now a little bit about your charity's constitution. And first thing I'm going to do is ask you 2 poll questions. So let's fire away with number 1. So do you know what your charity's constitution is called? What's the name of the document? Put your thoughts in. Okay, just getting ready to close this, so click if you haven't. Okay, and let's see the result. So a really good margin of you are confident you know what the document is called, and an honest proportion of you are not confident you know what the name of the document would be. Thank you. And second question then is, have you read your charity's constitution? So anybody who hasn't clicked, click now, and we'll close this down. Okay, so a very good proportion of you have read it. I think if my maths is right, some of you who weren't sure what it's called still think you've read it, which is an interesting correlation. So maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I wonder which document you actually read. So a number of you are honestly saying, no, I haven't. And therefore, perhaps that points up a need to understand better how important it is to a charity. Thank you, Ed. That's great. So why does constitution matter? Why is it important that you identify it, make sure you're looking at the right one, and include all the changes that are made to it that are still effective? So in other words, look at the document as it stands today. Why do you need to find it, read it, understand it, follow it? Well, the Constitution is the governing document of the charity, and it sets the framework for the governance of the charity by its trustees. It contains important principles and procedures that are to be followed, and in effect, it's the charity's rule book. There are other rules that affect the charity and that the charity must follow, so not everything is in the Constitution, and that can be a misconception, but it is absolutely vital the charity is aware of what is my governing document, what exactly is my governing document. I was talking to a charity this morning where they've been looking at a document that couldn't possibly be their governing document. And they're about to commit to a big transaction actually as well, having thought that they were following their governing document, which doesn't apply to them at all. It couldn't possibly be theirs because it's a form of governing document that applies to a completely different sort of legal charity. So that one was close to disaster. So it's the governing document, contains some important principles and procedures to be followed. It's important for trustees because one of their general duties is to ensure the charity operates in accordance with its constitution. The constitution is binding on the trustees, and if you are a charity with a membership, it's also binding on the members. They have to follow the constitution as well. The Charity Commission very much expects trustees to have an understanding of their charity's constitution and to seek help if they're not sure about it, if they don't understand it, if they're not sure whether they've actually dealt properly with changes and are looking at effective changes. Better still, seek help before you make the changes, of course, to get them right. Those are all the kind of areas that we can help with and do help clients with on a regular basis. The Commission absolutely expects a charity to be operated within the terms of its constitution, and it can be and it will be critical of trustees that fail to do that. And there can be adverse consequences of getting things wrong with your constitution. For example, the trustees might be open to challenge as to whether they took a valid decision. There might be doubt about who the members or the trustees are, which in itself can mean that trustees find it hard to prove they've run the charity as required by law, or decisions weren't properly taken because it wasn't certain who was the right group of people to take them or in what way they could be taken. You might not respect the rights of your members and get something legally wrong because of that, because you fail to understand and apply aspects of the constitution. There might be doubts about the proper authority of people to whom the trustees have delegated authority, the chief executive, the senior leadership team, board committees, investment managers. Outsiders might be unwilling to deal with your charity as partners, service providers, funders, or otherwise, and more possible consequences. And the charity could find itself in disputes or have its reputation damaged and its support diminished in these kind of circumstances. The trustees might find themselves criticised and challenged by supporters, donors, members, the media, the wider public, or they might find themselves being challenged, investigated, or sanctioned by the Charity Commission. So those are some of the reasons why constitutions matter. Next slide, Ed, thank you. So what kind of areas are likely to be in the charity's constitution? And again, the contents vary charity to charity, partly depending on its legal type, partly depending on when the constitution was created, partly depending on choices that were made about what's in the constitution. But almost certainly, and in the vast majority of charities, it will include the charitable purposes, the objects of the charity, the very foundation stone of the charity. The purposes tell you why the charity is there. What does it exist to address? Homelessness, a particular disease, poverty. Likely, they also tell you how it either can or sometimes must go about that. The objects may require it to provide a night shelter, to operate a hospice. Sometimes the how it goes about it is implied by the wording of the objects. Sometimes it's spelled out. And the objects will tell you who the beneficiaries are. Is it those with life-limiting illnesses and their families, for example? If you're a membership charity, it will deal with how new members are admitted and some of the circumstances in which membership ends. It'll also probably cover some aspects of members' rights and how they exercise those. For example, their rights in relation to general meetings of members and decision-taking and participation at those meetings. And those kind of procedures and requirements are very important to get right. It should make it clear how the trustees are appointed and rules on, for example, if there are rules on how long they can serve. There's likely to be something about circumstances in which people cease to be trustees as well. And it should certainly set out some aspects of trustees' decision-making, how they make decisions, how they can delegate some aspects of the day-to-day running of the charity to others. Remember, you can't delegate trusteeship to others. And it's very likely, particularly in more modern charities, to set out rules on conflicts of interest for trustees. It will reflect some of the fundamental legal restrictions on charities, so restrictions on benefits that can be provided to trustees and people connected with trustees. Remember, the legal starting point is that payments, remuneration, and other material benefits can't be permitted for trustees unless there's relevant legal authority. One of the potential sources of legal authority is the Constitution, for limited exceptions to the no benefits rule. And there might also be restrictions on legal benefits to members reflected in the Constitution. There should also be clauses that restrict how the funds and assets are used, protect them to the use of that charity's purposes, and that deal with what would happen to the funds and assets on the dissolution of the charity. Again, that they would have to go to comparable charitable purposes. Those are some of the areas that might be in the Constitution. So, Ed, the next slide, please. Now, in many cases, the Constitution is king, and it is paramount and it must be followed. And I pointed out that it's binding on trustees and members, and trustees have a duty to ensure the charity operates within it. But be a little careful on that, because there are plenty of exceptions where there is an overriding legal rule or requirement. Far too many to list out and talk about at length today, but we'll give you a few examples. I'd say be a little bit careful, as I quite often say to people in the charity sector, with the Charity Commission's published comments. For understandable reasons, they try these days to make them very short, very simple, very accessible. And they do tend to give the impression with Constitution that as long as you read it and obey it, there's no more to it than that. And that isn't true, because no Constitution is comprehensive on all the legal rules that affect that charity. And there are areas where the legal rules would undoubtedly override. If the Constitution was at odds with the legal rules or regulatory requirements or ignores them. For example, just a few examples, the core legal principles about the use and the protection of charitable funds, the restrictions on benefits to members and trustees, the fact that the funds and assets must be applied to and within the charitable purposes, and that on winding up they have to be given to comparable charitable purposes. All examples where the law isn't an absolute override on that. Rules around who's competent to serve as a trustee and people disqualified as trustees or removed as trustees. Those often, in most cases, override anything in the Constitution. You can't use the Constitution as a way of ignoring those rules. There are special protections for members' rights, particularly in charitable incorporated organisations and companies. And again, you can't override those by pointing to the Constitution, either not reflecting those rights or saying something different. When there are compulsory reporting and accounting requirements and deadlines, those override anything in the Constitution. And where there are legal procedures, regulatory permissions or consents that must be obtained, for example, something that still needs Charity Commission consent or requires a procedure to be followed before it can be validly done, then those absolutely must be followed in those circumstances, regardless of what's in the Constitution. That's not a comprehensive list and it can't possibly describe all the circumstances, but it's a key warning really that although the Constitution is hugely important, you can never treat it as a comprehensive operational document for your charity that tells you everything you need to know. It's always going to be far from that. Thank you, Ed. Let's have the next poll now. So when was the last time you think your Constitution was reviewed and it may or may not have then been altered? Let's have a straw poll on that. Okay, anybody else submit your thoughts on that for your charity? Counting down, and we'll close it. Okay, so an honest small number say it's never been reviewed. A very good proportion of you don't know. Some of you think it was less than 5 years ago, and some of you think it might have been, but more than 5 years ago. So quite a spread there as to what people think is the position in their charity. Thank you. So signs of age are one of the things that you need to think about in terms of, is it time to review? Might it be time for change in the Constitution? It's not the be all and end all. And again, it depends on circumstances. But as a rough rule of thumb, if it's more than 5 years since anything was reviewed, it's probable that you may have some potential areas where you could improve things, get rid of some problems for yourself, and bring the Constitution into line with current law, regulatory requirements, Charity Commission expectations, and modern charity governance standards. So age is an important trigger to thinking about review. The Charity Commission does encourage that charities ought to be alive to the signs of change on their constitutions, and it is quite enthusiastic about periodic review. Review doesn't necessarily lead to change, but sometimes, of course, it does point to change. So if you're thinking about reviewing your constitution, again, by all means, come and talk to us. It's the kind of thing we can help with. What might else trigger it? Well, what about your governance arrangements? If you don't have limited terms of office for trustees and want to put them in, or maximum periods of service, you might have unworkable provisions. Some of these are real life examples from charities we're working with. A requirement that someone who holds a particular post has to be a trustee when that post doesn't exist. A requirement to have a particular officer post, and you don't have that, you've been in breach of that for years. You should have a vice chair. It says you must appoint one, but you don't, because there's nothing that you need a vice chair to do. So you're in breach of your constitution. No sense in maintaining constitutions that have provisions in those kind of circumstances. Think also about the range of your charity's activities in its own situation. That might be a trigger for change. Think about the external factors, the setting of the charity, the circumstances in which it operates, changes to society or social norms, perceptions and expectations of your stakeholders, the strategic direction of your key partners. Are there factors there that are making it awkward to operate your charity with its current constitution? Sometimes it puts you out of the norms that are accepted in life in general, in society in general, or perhaps in the area where your charity operates. Sometimes terminology can be very dated and felt to be a bad fit. You can think of examples where changes in how we use language might be important in that context. Now, if you're going to make changes, you do need to make sure they're drawn up carefully to fit with the rest of the Constitution and be correct for the legal form of the charity, a trust, a members association, a company, a charitable incorporated organisation. You need to think about the process of change, and that is different according to the legal form. Membership permission might be needed, not just trustee permission. The right people have to take the right decisions in the right ways. And again, all of this we can help you with. And there are plenty of changes that do need prior Charity Commission consent and won't be effective without it. There are also tripwires about when changes take effect. Some take effect when the relevant decision is taken by the right group of people, some not taking effect until something else. So a change of objects of a charitable company doesn't take effect until it's registered with Companies House. No change to a CIO constitution takes effect until you've notified it to the Charity Commission. And lots of CIOs have got ineffective changes they believe they've made to their constitutions because of that. And there's requirements around the registrations, the notifications, the record keeping. And again, you need to get all that right. Do come and seek help with those kind of things. So those are some of the situations in which change is necessary or appropriate. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, sometimes it's advisable. That leads us on to our quick legal and regulatory update for you. One thing not on your screen now, but important to mention, the Charity Commission has now firmed up its approach to wanting you to file your annual reporting within the required deadline. It was giving us a fair bit of leeway during the worst of the pandemic last year, but now it will expect you to file on time. You can still apply to it if you've got an imminent filing deadline up to 30th September 2021 for a now fixed 3-month delay on that, if but only if there's extreme COVID circumstances that mean you absolutely can't meet the deadline. But their starting point now is they expect you to meet the deadline. Safeguarding, there's been some recent Charity Commission safeguarding alerts, and although they're largely spoken about as being in relation to charities providing international aid, some of them are really important issues for all charities: alertness to risk and taking proper actions, making it easier for those affected to make allegations of misconduct and abuse, adopting a survivor-centred approach to handling incidents of harm, fostering a culture of rooting out abuse. On the fundraising preference service, my plea there is that you realise that the general public can ask for a charity to make changes to its database and not contact them, or not contact them in certain ways. And it can make that request whether or not the charity is registered with the fundraising preference service run by the fundraising regulator. Whether or not it's registered with the fundraising regulator scheme itself. So any charity can be asked to do this. And if there is a request made by the member of the public to the fundraising regulator, the regulator gets in touch with the charity by its contact method shown on the Charity Commission website as public contact, in particular the email address shown there. And there have been incidents where charities have not replied to a request because they weren't monitoring the inbox, it was going to spam, or it was a defunct inbox, and the regulator has made sanctions against charities, public criticism of them for failure to suppress the database when they weren't aware a request had even been made. So for goodness sake, be careful about that, action them and make sure that you're monitoring where the request would come in from the fundraising regulator. A couple of points on charity abuses that the Charity Commission is currently looking at or has had to act about. Loan agreements and transactions between charities and their subsidiaries, where there might have been unauthorised benefits to trustees, conflicts of interest, or connected party transactions, none of which were properly addressed. And some cases, I'm afraid, of criminality, theft of significant funds, for example, from an anti-poverty charity by 2 trustees. Factors that helped them do that included inadequate financial record keeping by the charity and improper processing of donations into business and personal bank accounts. Salutary lesson. Ed, you have one update, I think, from your perspective.
Thank you, Cecile. Just the last point here. We've discussed this a little bit over our last 2 events. Actually, there is a new statement of recommended practice for charities that is in process, and there's a whole process of consultation and research and reflection going on at the moment. We're expecting a new SORP in 2024. The SORP is really sort of says to charities, this is how you are to prepare your accounts. And one thing, if you know a little bit about this, you'll know that the SORP it actually is based on financial reporting standards, FRS 102, and actually what the regulators have just done is written a public open letter to the Financial Reporting Council, really just saying, actually, there's so much in charity accounts which has to be there simply because you've got these financial standards that are very much driven for shareholder value and shareholder needs, and as charities we're kind of stuck with them because we have to comply with FRS 102. So really, they've written a letter saying, we would like you, please, as you revise FRS 102, to make it much more friendly for charities, make it more possible for us to take a more flexible approach with charities. And that may not be of interest to you, but I think the thing that might be of interest to some is that one of the aspects of that will actually be to remove a lot of clutter from the accounts, a lot of the extra kind of notes, extra information that a lot of people find confusing and not particularly valuable to the user. And so we're hoping that the FRC will respond very positively to that letter, and they'll be, we'll of course talk to you about those changes as and when they get confirmed. But thanks so much for listening. We're going to take a few minutes for some questions now. And what I'm going to do, first of all, we'll make our way through the few questions we've got in the chat. But actually, once we're through those, if you would like to ask a question out loud, or indeed if you'd like to put one in the chat, but if you'd like to ask one out loud, there's a couple of ways to do that. If your camera is on, you could stick your hand in the air like that, and we'll try and notice it and bring you on screen after we've gone through these questions. Alternatively, if you might have a reactions button in the bottom right, which gives you a chance to raise an electronic hand, and if you do that, that will get flagged up, and we'll then through the system ask you to unmute and to ask your questions. But we'll go firstly to the questions that we've had in the chat. First one from Emma from Brace. Emma, great to have you with us. I know actually you've had to leave a little bit early, so I'm going to answer this anyway for everybody, and hopefully you'll catch up with the recording. But you ask, when it comes to gift aid declarations, that you've had contrary information from your accounts team, that you have to have a specific declaration for each donation to be able to tie a specific donation value to the declaration. So actually that's not the case. So the most important thing is the declaration identifies what donations the declaration covers. Now, it might be that the declaration covers a specific donation, in which case you need to say what that donation was and when it was received. But actually it's possible for a donor to fill in a declaration that says, I want you to claim gift aid on all my donations from now on until I cancel that declaration in the future. And that's a perfectly valid declaration as well. The most important thing is that the declaration identifies the particular donations or the class of donations or the donations that it's designed to cover. So that's the first one. Second one, thanks, Bob. Where a fee for entry has an optional additional charge to make it gift aid, is the tax benefit on the whole amount or just the excess amount? So Bob's referring here to the gift aid provision around the right of admission to view charity property. And the rules talk about the fact that actually if a chance to make a donation that is at least 10% more of the general public cost of admission, then gift aid can apply. Just to say, that does turn the whole amount into a gift aid donation. The whole amount can be claimed on that. Of course, the other provision there is that actually, instead of it being 10% more than the general public cost of admission, actually, if there is an amount that's paid that enables the donor or the donor's family to access the property for unlimited times in the sort of a 12-month period, that also can count as a gift aid donation. I don't want to ban these comments around too kind of lightly, because there are detailed rules here, and it's important to go and look at them. And again, we'll include a link to these rules in the responses. Cecile, a question for you here. We are a charity and a company limited by guarantee. One of our trustees is rewriting our Articles of Association, but has started with a lawyer's precedent for company limited by guarantee. The draft does not mention the word charity. Will the Charity Commission reject this? Need to just come off mute a minute, Cecile.
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute. The starting point has to be your existing articles, and you must start from those. Remember, there are lots of companies limited by guarantee that are not charities. It sounds to me very much like the person is looking at a document not written for a charity. Therefore, lots of features that must be in your articles or need to be reflected in your articles because you are a charity will not be there. You must make sure you carry forward anything appropriate from your current articles if that's needed in the circumstances. And remember, it isn't just about the Charity Commission rejecting it. It doesn't vet per se what you put in, but it might be an invalid change if you do it wrong. And it does sound to me like you're using a document that isn't the right starting point. Whether or not the word charity is used, it's highly likely if the word charity or charitable is not used anywhere, then that can't possibly be a document designed for a charity. I'd need to look at the specifics to give you detailed advice, but it sounds to me like you're starting from the wrong place.
Thank you, Cecile. Thanks, Jason, for your question. You're asking, what's the definition of a community building when it comes to the Gift Aid on Small Donation Scheme? You may regret asking this question, Jason, because it's quite a detailed answer. I'll just give you the headlines and I'll point you towards the guidance. But a community building is a building or a part of a building that a charity uses to do charitable activities from. And to qualify as a community building under these rules, the charitable activities must have 10 or more beneficiaries happening at events that are at least 6 times during that particular tax year. I told you might regret asking this. But also there's certain other rules around the fact that, for example, it must be a public space open to the general public, that actually it's not something you can't make a charge for people to be able to attend those. Things like that. So, you know, the typical community building might be, for example, a village hall, might be a church building, perhaps most commonly. It might be a scout hut where something happens, but that would qualify as a community building. There is quite a long, detailed list of bullet points here, but that's the general rule. It's a building or part of a building that a charity uses to run charitable activities, meeting certain criteria. Great. We've come to the end of questions in the chat. If you would like to ask a question out loud, please raise your hand if your camera's on. If your camera's off, I'm afraid we won't see your hand being raised, but you could raise your electronic hand if that helps, just to allow an opportunity for people to ask a question now. A little scan around a bit. I'm going to be brave. Great. Well, thank you so much. We're going to finish there. I just want to mention that our next charity catch-up is happening on the 12th of August, Thursday the 12th of August, after we send around the information from this event. The recording and the slides will include a reminder of those details. It's our summer charity catch-up, so wear your favourite summer hat, put some sunglasses on. It'll be a party atmosphere, I'm sure, as we talk about topics relevant to charities. Cecile, just give us a little insight as well as our hopes for November.
Thank you, Ed. Trustees happens in early November, and last year, of course, it had to be purely online and was a low-key event, but we like to support Trustees Week to honour charities and their trustees, and we're hoping to have an event during Trustees Week. It would be the first week of November, and it might be an event on the Thursday, which is the 4th, could be some other time in that week. What we'd very much like is that if you could suggest what kind of event would be welcome and helpful. Format will depend on what's possible at the time with the COVID and pandemic situation, but it might be an in-person one, it might be a hybrid event, might be an online event, but could you think about what you'd like? A social event, a learning event, what kind of format, what kind of time of day, any content. And if you could come back to us, either email us or put it in your feedback on your feedback form. We very much welcome your thoughts, and we'll shape our planning around that, as well as around the practical possibilities as those become more obvious as we get a little nearer that date. So first week of November, Trustees Week event, what would you like?
Thank you, Cecile, and thank you everybody for being with us. We hope that you found it helpful. Please don't hesitate to contact us, perhaps by replying to the feedback email, the post-event mailing, but also, we're here to help. We're here to help you unpack any of the content that we have been talking about today or more. We recognise that sometimes when you hear information like this, you want to be able to unpack it in your own context, and we'd be delighted to help you do that and to provide you the assistance you need to take those steps forward. But have a great rest of the day, whatever you've got planned. We hope to see you next time. Bye for now.